Infinite money glitch. Trust lending, is it here to stay? We've heard about Macquarie shutting down trust loans. Now other banks are coming out and shutting down trust structures, closing down on these investors who were spruiking that you could get all this money, that it was basically free, and you could go into infinity and build that $100 million portfolio. I certainly didn't get any free money, Nevada. How about you tell us what's going on in the lending space as of 2026 in the trust lending space?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, if unlimited lending was a thing, my job would be a lot easier, but...
I wish your money came as easy as some of these spruikers on YouTube and Instagram said it did, because I didn't get any free tickets of trust lending. Like my trust lending, and I've got a few granny flats and trust structures. I've probably got 3, 4, 5, 6 trust structures, but I didn't actually see in my portfolio any unique outliers. But tell us what people were doing and where it's heading.
So the strategy was, which is a legitimate strategy that was kind of being taken advantage of, is people will be buying properties under a trust structure. Now, lenders have a lot of the time a policy that if a property is held under a trust, there's certain ways to verify if that trust is looking after itself. So quite legitimately, if that property is positively geared and looking after its own costs, that can be excluded from serviceability.
And how would we make it positively geared? Like, what are you seeing the most common way investors would say to the bank? It's positively geared, leave it be.
In legitimate cases, they were properties with higher yields, people having dual income, granny flat on the property, people
strata block, like unit blocks as well.
Commercial properties, larger deposits as well.
30-40% deposits.
So all those quite legitimate ways. People had kind of established that there was, simpler ways, and to say it was a negatively geared property, getting a letter from an accountant saying it is positively geared.
Parking some money for a month there and taking that money after they get their financing.
Correct. Which is against the spirit of why that policy existed. And there was even certain lenders that weren't asking for any form of verification. They were just kind of taking it on a self-declaration.
I am good to make repayments. Trust me, bro. Give me the money, bro. And I think that's why recently there has been a crackdown in the space.
And the good thing about that policy existing, it just means that, just say I have a company over here and I'm not declaring income from that company, but that business has, it's a trade business and it's got 50 car loans, but the business is paying for all those car loans. Well, it's quite reasonable in that situation that they should be excluded, because I'm not also declaring income from that. So that,
and even those properties, like you said, commercial, unit blocks, granny flats, all bring in income that does service the debt. And I think the big thing, as you probably agree, is that it is for not just a month, it's for an extended period of time.
Correct. It's legitimately something that isn't requiring your cash flow to be input.
Moving forward.
Because the lender's assessing your affordability on that cash flow. So if it's earmarked for other things, they want to kind of know. That's the thought behind it. If I have a company that's losing money and I got to put in $10,000 a month to keep it going, they want to know about that.
Same with your property investment, right?
Exactly. So what's happened is people have sort of, well, my assumption, to be honest, but it's probably a reasonable assumption, is that
there's a lot of talk in the chats online.
Exactly. So people have taken advantage of that policy, and the result of that is a lot of lenders have, in my opinion, temporarily, without notice on how long they're stepped away from trust lending. So a lot of the good go-to options for trust lending are now just completely out of it, to the point where they won't even touch clients who have existing trust lending if they want to make changes on it. That's how hard they're going on not doing trust lending. So the result of that, there are still options. There's still lenders who quite legitimately will lend to trust, but there's less options. And it's resulted in two things. Less options means it's going to be a little bit more expensive, unfortunately.
And you're paying higher interest rates to get access to using that structure.
Correct, because there's just, fewer options for me to consider for you. And then the other factor to that is the lenders who are still on your tier 1 competitive interest rates are being bombarded, so they're much slower. So we had a situation recently where a client purchased a property unconditionally, extended settlements. I think it was a 60-day settlement period. And it was under a trust structure because of advice from their accountant around their tax situation. Now, in that situation, we had 2 lender options: more expensive and fast, and less expensive but extremely slow. Slow to the point that if I lodge the application, they won't start looking at it for 20 business days.
Wow.
So
you gotta be worried.
Putting my risk mitigation hat on for that client, being that they've paid a significant deposit that's non-refundable, I need to make sure it settles on time. So my strategy in that particular instance was I lodged an application with both. I wouldn't normally do that. I have enough confidence in my ability to pick lenders to do concurrent applications, but in that particular situation, I was like, let's just hedge our bets here.
That's a great call.
Lodged with the fast, more expensive lender and the slow, cheaper lender.
Mm-hmm.
And the result of that was I was freaking myself out for no reason. We ended up getting the cheaper lender approved in time anyway, with no issue.
Yep.
But the fast lender was approved much earlier, so the client was less stressed during that process. And now we're due to settle in a week's time on the cheaper lender.
That's great.
Impact to the client by doing the 2 applications is 1 extra credit inquiry. So not ideal, a little bit of a credit impact, but a credit inquiry is not the end of the world.
Yeah. And the thing with trust structures for me, I'm a chartered accountant by trade. So before I started the buyer's agency 5 years ago, I'm still a registered chartered accountant, and I'm not going to give you an accountant letter if you ask, but I still have that full CA status. And so it was interesting seeing the dynamics as both a chartered accountant and a licensed buyer's agent in what was happening in the market. How many guys were pushing these strategies to really get that extra edge of borrowing capacity. And I'm all for getting access to lending, but it's got to be within the safe guidelines, because that's where people get caught in trouble, taking on too much debt, not managing their repayments, and getting into risky scenarios.
If you're buying the properties, you don't want to be in a situation where you're forced to sell them, and just because you can get access to lending, just because you can, doesn't mean you always should. And this is one of those situations. And if you calculate it and there's a shortfall in a trust structure, and you still have the affordability and it's all declared and whatnot, I mean, if you can afford it, there's no issue.
And I have...
It's just about making sure you can afford it.
Yeah, I've probably got 5... I don't even know, to be honest with you.
E.
So yeah, 5, 6, I think
E.
A, B, C, D, E. It's like, there's 5 or 6, and there's going to be more. I'm going to continue to use trust structures, and it's not just tax minimization or tax planning. It's also about different states. It's also about risk mitigation from a litigious point of view for family and future. Also for giving assets to my children. Having different trusts is great for that. And so I encourage clients when it makes sense to them, especially if you're doing multiple income properties. You know, we've done a previous chat on granny flats and how you can fund them and how you can finance them and how you can actually build those assets for a reasonable price and then work with your broker to go again. And so trust structures tend to lean towards those types of assets, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not an accountant. I don't give accounting advice or tax advice, but I used to work in an accounting firm. Well, that's not worth much at all. But if I see a situation where there's an indication that there's probably something to consider here, I always recommend people get advice from their accountant. Because the reality is, having an extra conversation early in the piece is so much easier than trying to unwind the wrong decision down the track. I can answer the questions from the lending perspective around capacities and all that sort of stuff, but there's a lot of tax stuff that I can't. A situation I bring up, I use it as an example. I had a client who had overseas income, worked for a tech business in the US, and paid a monster salary, and it was declared as personal services income in Australia. So not much you can declare against it.
It is what it is. You've got to pay big taxes.
Exactly. And her husband had a business, and the business was in the early stages, so not a high taxable income on his side. And they're expecting to stay that way for some time. They sent the heavily negatively geared investment property over to me at 50-50 ownership.
Interesting.
I said to them, look, I'm not an accountant. I suggest you make a call to your accountant, because it might be worthwhile for you to look at a different ownership percentage. Again, don't take my word for it. Get it checked. They called back about half an hour later, changed the contract at a fee to change the contract.
Might pay $500, $1,500 to get it fixed.
To a 90-10 structure, 90% in the female applicants of the high incomes name. And she said to me that it was somewhere between, what her accountant advised there was somewhere between a $5,000 to $7,000 a year difference.
Wow.
So quite a big difference, so it pays to have an extra conversation.
And I think that's the really important thing, is that your broker can give you options. Like when our clients, our clients, people who sign up with the buyer's agency and people who just go direct to Nevada, regardless of whether you're using my and our team's services, you guys can give options in the personal name. So what does that look like? What does it look like in a trust structure? What would it look like if you wanted to do a flipping and you wanted to have a company structure? So you guys can plan, and they call it game plans. They can give you a game plan about your personal lending capacity, the trust structure capacity, bit of a mouthful, and the whole picture, so you can build out a sustainable portfolio that's going to give you choices. And that's honestly what it's all about. Get that team around you that have the experience, because the amount of players out there who are willing to push the limits and maybe not actually experience the journey with you is, you want to build that right team that's going to get you where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good. Well, that's an update for you on trust structures. Hopefully it's given you some insights into what's happening this year. If you want to find Nevada or myself, you can head over to our website, purposeproperty.com.au. There's links to book in with the brokers, book in with myself for a free chat. We can discuss your situation, how we can help you move forward, and take it from there. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, guys.